Previously on Bulk Boys.
They were letting me get concussed as shit
A secret door in the closet,
when I'm hungry, which is never.
no singlet, just your ass out.
And I beat the fuck out of this guy.
I saw the anadrol in his face.
Do not listen to me. I won. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of your women.
I am the strongest! I am the Viking!
Please, we can kill it.
So this upcoming event, has the events list been released yet?
Just got the mystery event. So it was
Okay.
we had 5, and then there was one that they were going to give us closer to the contest. They just gave us the mystery event. So I know all 6 now. So we have 2 pressing events in the show. So I've got 2 overhead days right now. And I'm doing one for each of the different disciplines. There is a log ladder, which I have kind of set the challenge for myself to Viper press the ladder. Obviously, Viper press is a faster technique, but not a stronger technique.
Yeah.
So it's like, hypothetically, if I can do it, that's great. If I can't, I'm a dickhead, but I'm going to try. It's like the log ladder it starts at 285. You put a 10 on each side, 305, 325, 345, all in succession. You load it yourself. And
interesting.
I would like to Viper. That would be a pretty stout performance if I can Viper press all the way through the series. We'll see. That 345 sounds a little heavy, but I'm going to give her a go.
Nice.
I know I can do the series to 325 Vipered. Absolutely. The question is if I can get that 345. Maybe I should be practicing using my leg drive, but I'm kind of all in on Viper. I called my shot, so I'm going to try to Viper press. Otherwise, that log press day would be with leg drive, right? Because I'm not trying to be cool leg drive or cool no leg drive guy. I'd like to be the guy with good leg drives and strong shoulders personally. You know, I think part of the reason I bench 600 is because I am very technically efficient. You know, people are like, oh, it's pretty crazy that you're not the biggest guy in the world and you bench 600. And it's like, well, part of the reason I'm able to do that is because I am a pretty technically sound bencher. You know, there's guys who also bench 600 that are so much stronger than me. When I watch their technique versus mine, and it's like relatively inefficient, I'm like, wow, that is a strong guy. Like the guys that dump it into their chest, they internally rotate at the shoulder, just relax and then pop it up with like no leg drive. Their feet are twitching. It's like, you have so much more upper body strength than me. I'm able to hang with these bigger people through my technique. So why would I be arrogant and be like, well, I bench 600? That's like, you know, that's static power. I'm going to be the strict press guy. No, following the spirit of what got me my success. If I want to be good at putting stuff over my head, I also should be technically like strong and technically efficient is what would let me keep up with people that are so much bigger than me. You know, like why it would be a weird logic. People are like, oh, well, Sam, you bench press a lot. You should do a big strict press. At some point, I will do a 405 strict press because I think it's cool, but that is not proper strongman training. Training for a max strict press is not training for a max overhead with leg drive. It's not the same thing. And it's like, you're taking something that is useful as a supplemental lift and then taking it beyond its logical conclusion. And then, so my secondary overhead day, I'm doing a barbell continental clean. We're allowed to do belt cleans. So I just put it on my belt, pop it up to the shoulders, press it. And at the show, it is 315 for max reps in 60 seconds. So my secondary pressing day, which I do on Saturdays, is the barbell from the floor to overhead for reps.
Okay, gotcha. Your best push press right now is 380, is that right?
So I've done a 375 strict press.
Okay. Oh, okay. Strict press.
Layback, and I've done a 402 push press.
Wow.
I should be able to improve upon that 402 push press pretty. Like, that is not to me. And maybe I'm being arrogant because I've been arrogant a couple of times, and then things are harder to progress than I was expecting. I do not think that is reflective of my capabilities quite yet. I think I'll be able to get up to about 420 pounds on the push press before that starts to get sticky, and I do need to genuinely build my base wider and wider.
What's your like main accessory? Are you doing heavy dips? I know you like dips.
So I've laid off the dips for now because I was doing them for a bit, and my pecs were very tight following that session. So then on my secondary overhead day, my overhead position was a little bit off. I want to get back into them. I'll just have more homework to do in terms of mobility, because that's something that differs between larger athletes like myself and smaller athletes. Smaller athletes, the mobility probably isn't a big part of the homework. It's the other parts like the nutrition, the sleep, the active recovery type of stuff. For bigger athletes, mobility is part of your homework. Right. Because if you can position yourself in more efficient positions, again, it's a way I can beat bigger people, is being able to move more efficiently. And part of that is preserving that mobility in your shoulders. Part of that's preserving the mobility in your hips, just being able to do things in a more efficient way than the other big guys that are a little bit bound up is another way I gain competitive advantage. Max does mobility every single night. I think it's a very big part of his success. What was I talking about? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just asking you about your kind of primary accessories
So
to
the
drive
dips,
that on the pressing.
Probably will get back into them. I love dips. But I'll have more homework to do in terms of keeping my pecs at the level of mobility, because they did tighten up my pecs a little bit more than I would like. So right now I'm doing something like a barbell high incline press, which is right now it's doing like dead to pins, because that's more like a log press, because the log starts, let's call it like 6 inches off your chest, maybe a little bit less, and it's dead. So it's kind of like, it's like a deadlift or a pin press. So I'm doing it to pins and creating that force from a dead stop after my log press. Doing a lot of like neutral grip chin-ups. And then as always, a lot of tricep isolation. And then on my secondary day, doing behind the neck presses. I'm doing heavy dumbbell French presses, face pulls, and rack lockouts. So it looks a little different than my bench training.
Okay. Yeah. The rack lockouts, that I guess that translates really well to overloading that kind of final position and just getting comfortable.
It's really good for push pressing, because it's like, if you're remotely proficient with your leg drive, here to here is largely covered through momentum. So it's like, where do we really need high demands of shoulder strength? It's like hairline up.
Yeah.
If I had one.
Right. Mine's creeping back, man. My forehead grows every day. So
hey, no, you gotta enjoy it while it lasts, man. Like
exactly.
Now I have when I had hair, I'd see people with long hair and I'm like, oh, gay. And now I'm like, God, dude, I respect it. Enjoy it while it lasts, brother.
I'll hang on.
I feel nothing but happiness for people that are enjoying their ability to have hair.
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna have the skullet eventually, where it's balled up here and just the back. Yeah. The Andy Williams every time I die haircut.
Damn right.
Yeah. So your primary squat movement right now, I think, is SSB. Is that right?
Yep. A lot of my strongman guys will be doing like an SSB primary day and either like a pause SSB secondary, or a lot of the time it'll be a front squat secondary day. Because squat is rarely a competitive motion. It's more a general developmental motion. I like that the SSB kind of challenges a squat, but with a slightly flexed thoracic. And then the front squat challenges a squat, but with an extended thoracic. And it also forces athletes to get good at dealing with heavy loads in front of their body, which is a cornerstone of strongman. We carry stuff in front of us. We push press stuff in front of us. A lot, like deadlifts are in front of us. Dealing with heavy loads, a lot of the time, a Zercher, they're going to be big loads in front of our body. And so doing a front squat is good general leg training, and it forces your torso to get stronger at dealing with loads trying to pull you forward. So it's kind of a great 2 birds, 1 stone. It supplements overhead very well. It supplements stone lifting very well. So it's a very good general developmental tool for strongman. So a lot of the time it'll be like 1 SSB day, 1 front squat day. I do want to get back into, Max and I ordered some squat stands from like Texas Strength Systems to put in the garage because we are fat and our hands are on the catches. So it's very hard to unrack it without like taking a bunch of skin off the outside of the hand.
Yeah.
So this way I can camber them in. So I'll probably be doing a bout of straight bar squatting, maybe after the 880, maybe before it. Because I don't like that I'm a specialty bar guy. And like, I just think barbell squat is such a simple movement that not having a very good result in it is embarrassing to me. Like I would like to be like, 8 plates, 800. Like I just like having a good result in that. Then I'll go, maybe I could go back. Maybe I won't. Kind of depends on how much I like. Even high bar, sometimes if I do it wrong, I get a little bit of like bicep tendonitis. So that's kind of why I favor towards the SSB. But I should probably fix that instead of running away from it.
How would you go about fixing that? As a guy who has done 2 sessions of low bar in the past, well, all year, and already inflamed his tendonitis.
So part of that, right, is the part of the reason it's inflamed is because you've only done it twice in the year, right?
Fair enough.
So it's like you do develop position specific load tolerance by loading those specific positions. So some amount of this would go away by, instead of just going really heavy because it's low bar, easing into it, right? Like maybe you do a couple of squats at one plate for a while low bar, and then you move the bar up and you do your high bars. And then you get to graduate to, oh, I also do a couple of sets low bar with 2 plates, and you ease into it. You will develop some amount of like position specific load tolerance. And that is no small part of it. And it's part of the problem. Like I'm in the same spot you are. I've been away from it. So getting back into it, there's a certain level of discomfort that's going to come with returning those adaptations that, like, it's tricky, right? Because it can snowball out of control, but there's like, if you avoid it completely, it's never coming back, right? Like getting back into any physical endeavor, there's like, you're going to get a little bit banged up. If you get back into running, it's going to hurt. Like nothing's wrong. It's going to hurt a little bit. Right. And you have to know what you're doing enough to know how to titrate that up. Working on your thoracic mobility is no small part of that. A lot of guys lose their ability to extend through the thoracic. So if you imagine your thoracic is a little excessively kind of flexed forward, you're going to have unrealistic amounts of demand for shoulder external rotation. So yeah, if I were to give you like, you got to do low bar, maybe 1 to 2 times per week, light, doesn't have to be heavy. You could do your difficult squatting on a variation afterward. Work on your thoracic mobility. That could be like rotational, like quadruped elbow to ceilings. That can be cat camel. That can be arching your thoracic over a roller, whatever you feel works for you. Then we might want to work on like just grabbing a band and work on our external rotation at our shoulder. I also find that stretch, a lot of the time it comes from residual pec tightness from training the bench. Low bar squats and bench training do not pair together because they both interfere with each other. So that you have the tight pecs coming in, then you have more load sitting in your hands than you otherwise would. And then you get more arm pain, which then throws off your bench. And it's kind of like this endless cycle. So I find that just like putting my hands on the upright of a squat rack and just opening up my pecs before I squat, quite helpful. And then really the other things you're looking at is like potentially widening the grip slightly, because everybody likes to cram their grip narrow because it makes your back tightness automatic. When you widen your grip, you have to create that back tightness a little bit more manually. And then no one wants to manually create back tightness. They want it to happen automatically. So sometimes we take that grip slightly wider, and then we have to really adjust our cueing for our upper back. Different people use different cues. I don't have a one size fits all for that. But yeah, usually we're looking at like, okay, we've got these basic ideas of thoracic mobilization, external rotation mobilization, and pec mobilization. We have taking the grip a tad wider. And then we also really are looking at working on our cue set of creating that upper back tightness and almost pulling the hand away from the bar. Because a lot of the time that arm pain will come from excessive load being bared through the hands. It's just an amount of load that your arms are not ready for. So we really want to get better back tightness and think about all of the weight being supported across our upper back. And then the hands are just there for stability and balance. And we're almost pulling them away from the bar. So that way we don't have this really excessive forward and upward pressure into the bar that will often lead to that kind of arm pain the next day. I don't think I organized that very well, but those are kind of my heavy hitters. Is like, you've got the mobilization, you've got the cue set of trying to get the load out of your hands and create better upper back tightness manually, rather than relying on that narrow grip to create it passively, because that narrow grip will usually come with greater load in the hands. And then you have the grip width adjustment.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for delving into that, because it's been this ongoing thing. And, you know, I got so frustrated around December. My squat was about the strongest it had ever been. And I was doing like a Greg Knuckles SBS 21-week strength program or whatever. And I was squatting 3 times a week. And it just got to the point where it was like, I can't bench, I can't do pull-ups. I got to just do high bar until it's better.
And then the other one is also like how you interact with the bar. Some guys take a skewed grip and put it way down here. That can lead to a lot of excessive pressure through the arms. Some guys put it way up in their fingers and let their wrist back as a way to take some stress off of the other parts of their arm and put a little bit more stress on the wrist if they can afford to make that change. Some guys are very true believers that we should have a straight wrist, right? Some guys do a talon grip where the pinky's under the bar. There's a million different ways specifically how we can kind of interact with that bar. And they're all worth playing around with to see if they allow us to decrease the amount of force being barred through our hands, or maybe change that force in a way like I said, Max lets his wrist back because he'll accept a little bit more wrist stress in exchange for a little bit less arm stress, because his wrists are thick and beefy. That it's not really a problem, and it doesn't throw off his bench press as much as taking that arm stress would ruin his bench the next day. So there's exchanges you can make in terms of how we interact with the bar, the grip width, how we create that upper back tightness. Maybe we do some assistance work to strengthen the upper back to create that tightness better. And then we also want to make sure that we don't have like mobility restrictions that are making it so we have tons of weight bearing through the hands, kind of regardless of load on the bar. A lot of time, if it's specific to load on the bar, maybe getting the upper back a little stronger could help.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's just, it all comes down to getting the back girthier, I guess.
There's a reason that's been kind of like a mainstay of powerlifting narrative is just hammer the fuck out of your upper back, even though it's like, it might not be all that directly important for any of the three if you really wanted to make that argument, but it supports all three well enough. It justifies the training economy, because everybody said like, but how the fuck does your upper back help your bench? Most big benchers seem to agree it does in some capacity. How could it help your squat? Most big squatters say your upper back strength is very important, despite like what the biomechanical analysis of like whether it's actually able to maintain your upper back positioning if you squeeze your lats. Who knows? Most of the guys who are good at it agree that some level of upper back development is helpful for all three, though. So it's a worthwhile investment.
And I can't neglect to mention, you brought up Max's kind of wrist position, most aesthetic low bar squatter of all time. I mean,
that's so funny. Me and Max don't like it.
Really? Oh man. Well, I'm sure you've seen Sika Strength shout him out.
Yeah, they love his depth. Hey, yes, I think it was yesterday was the first time I've actually made the Sika.
I saw the Viking
it was hurting my soul that Max has been on there like every week and I'm never on there. But based on me and Max's analysis, obviously we're very caught up in our own world of like, it's not relative to other people, it's relative to what we want Max to be, which is a record holder, right? It's like, where does he have the most room to improve? We're very pleased with his deadlift technique. There's some small things we're working on. His bench press technique has gotten a lot better. There's still some small things we're working on, but there's quite a few things that we are trying to round out in his squat technique to get him to that next level, right? Because it's like he's got a his bench is for like a tested super heavyweight. A lot of them can't bench, so it's like it's actually not out of place, his bench, but that needs to come up. His deadlift is already pretty respectable among tested super heavyweights not named Jesus. But if you look at the squat, that's where he's losing on the total. That's where he's got the most ground gain. And part of that will solve itself because Max is nowhere near a full-size super heavyweight. He weighs about 335 pounds. And squat is very responsive to body weight. Your leverages improve greatly as a super heavyweight. Assuming his career peak weight will be more like 360 pounds. That will directly benefit getting him more towards like a 900 plus squat, which is kind of necessary for building a total in the super heavyweight game. It's inherently squat biased because as you get to these bigger body weights, your deadlift leverages get worse and worse and worse, and your squat leverages get better and better and better. So the squat becomes the biggest part of the total, whereas for smaller weight classes, the deadlift is the biggest part of the total. So it's like if you're going to be good at one thing, it switches, right? Because it's like there's the most room to be gained. If you're like a 242, you look at the record holders, it's like guys with monster sumo deadlifts because that's the biggest portion of the total, and they can get away with maybe being at one of the other two. In the super heavyweight game, you need to be a good squatter for the most part. If you look at like the prodigious, like big total record holders, you look at Dan Bell, you look at Jesus, you look at Ray Williams, and then you look at Andrei Milanichev. All of them are monster squatters. Debatably their best lift. I think you could get into a niche argument that Jesus is the best stiff bar deadlifter of all time, or the strongest stiff bar deadlifter of all time, and not the strongest squatter of all time. So technically, maybe he's actually even a better deadlifter than squatter. But if you look at it, their squats are all the biggest parts of their total. They're not out deadlifting their squat. It's a necessary part of cobbling together a highly competitive super heavyweight total.
That makes a lot of sense. And you've always squatted high bar, is that right?
No, I used to do people never thought it was that low, but like I would call it low bar, mid bar, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. My first quite a few years when I was always on a straight bar, I just intuitively found like a mid bar position was pretty nice. And then I think I should have widened my grip at one point, but the squat racks didn't allow for it. So I started taking more of this kind of internally rotated grip, letting my wrists back. And that preserved my ability to keep doing it for maybe another couple of years. I went up another 60 pounds on my squat, but it got to the point where if I did anything wrong, my bicep tendons would get a little bit mad.
Okay.
And then I backed off of it, and then I had a hard time getting it back.
Okay.
I've never been very good at like a true high bar position. So that's something I'm actually very excited to fix.
And what is your best squat? Because I opened with this and I never got to it because we were talking about sumo.
My heaviest squat ever is 735 on the SSB.
Wow.
I did 715 on the straight bar like many moons ago when I was like 22. I'm quite a bit stronger now, so I'm assuming I could beat that. And I'm assuming I could squat more on a straight bar than an SSB with a bit of practice. But the heaviest I've gone is 735 on the SSB or a 700 pause SSB. Those are probably my two strongest squats to date.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible thoracic strength. So, no, not to you.
I'm getting smoked by Max.
Okay, yeah, that's true. It's all about your who you surround yourself with, I guess.
It's been a weird one for me because like squatting has not come naturally to me when it very much should. On paper, that should be the one that I intuitively understand. I've got a long torso, I've got short legs. My legs are pretty big. Just like when I started training, that was the first thing that responded. Like literally, my upper body didn't look like shit. And my legs just blew up. I got my quads just like bulged off my leg just the second I started squatting. But somehow my bench was still my best lift. And like it's never fully clicked in the way that I kind of would expect it to, because I kind of check those three. I've got favorable leverages, though you can be a very good squat. Everybody leverage copes on the squat, which fucking annoys me because it's like you don't hear me bitching. I mean, you hear me bitching a little bit, but I'm still going to deadlift a lot. I'm not saying I can't. Right? It's like the same, but people are like, I've got long femurs. It's like there's world record holders with long femurs. They just lean forward more and use the strong back that comes with having a shorter torso. Whoop-de-doo. Like fucking Ashton Ruska does not have a particularly short femurs, and he's one of the best squatters of all time. It's fine. But I've got favorable leverages, good leg hypertrophy. So I've got big legs and I'm flexible. Those kind of check the three boxes for someone for whom this would be the lift that makes the most sense. And for some reason, that hasn't been the case. Deadlifting has made more sense to me than squatting. But I'm refusing to be a doomer. Again, I'm kind of walking the walk because I hate when people are like, I have a poverty bench. And it's like, that's a sick, self-fulfilling prophecy you got there, buddy. You're just going to go into every bench session all doom and gloom and not have plans to fix it. If you just identify, like, that's a great way to stay that way. So it's like, I look forward to being a good squatter eventually. I'm going to fucking figure it out. It's just taken 11 years.
Yeah. As far as bench, I certainly am guilty of that mindset. Not in the sense that I can't improve, but like I just recognize that it's the shittiest of my shitty lifts. And and I think the thing that's mainly holding me back is I'm just not strong enough, actually. Funnily enough.
I mean, it's funny how that works with lifting weights because I always, like I've come to that same goddamn conclusion so many times of like I'll do some mental gymnastics for a while and I'll be like, oh, that guy's lifting more than me because his technique is better, and it's like maybe a little bit. Most of it is he's stronger than me. God damn it. It's like every time I think it's because it's not strength, it's this. No, he's god damn it. That guy is stronger than me at this. Like just flat out. How do I fix that? Get stronger. Stop trying to think you're like, that's a slippery slope into being like her, I don't care about technique guy, which I have been, and it did not work. My best lift is my most technical lift. There's no coincidence there. There's a reason for it, right? So it's like technique is paramount. But also getting stronger works. It's like I forget who there's this guy, RPE Max, who was just like a genetic freak. He was doing some of the big untested meets. He got banned from the USAPL for posting memes criticizing the USAPL, which is a pretty sick move. And he was like a super anti-technique, bro. He's just like, bro, just get stronger. It's like, of course you think that, motherfucker. God damn it.
But
he was just like, he was not wrong, because he was like at a very like USAPL centric gym, and people would just be like, well, I'm trying a 6x bench frequency to get my bench up.
Right.
And he's like, have you tried just getting your pecs stronger? And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not bad advice for some people that get too far down that rabbit hole. And all of us get too far that. So it's like, he just was like, yeah, no, your squat's bad. Have you tried just getting your legs stronger? That's a great, honestly, advice to get some people out of this like overthinking trap. He's like,
Sure.
yeah, after you squat, do some heavy hack squats and get stronger on those. Do some heavy split squats and leg extensions. If all three of those lifts go up, there's a very high chance your squat goes up,
Yeah.
to be honest
Yeah.
with you, right? It's like, oh, your deadlift sucks. Have you tried just getting your back stronger? I would include hamstrings in there if I was
Right.
him, but
Yeah.
back and hamstrings stronger. And so it's like, sometimes we do paint ourselves into like this cope of it's something. No, that guy that's lifting more than you is usually because he's a lot stronger than you. And
Yeah.
so you need to get stronger.
Right. And it's like, if you keep your technique the same and it's still your shitty technique, but you're stronger, you'll still lift, you'll still improve. You might not be expressing your strength optimally.
As best, well, the best case scenario is like you come in and you practice your bench, and you get really good at benching. So then you get jacked. And if you're jacked
Right.
and you're good at benching, you're probably a good bench presser. That's like, it's the same thing. It's like, if you've got big legs and you're a good squatter, you probably have a big squat.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you've got a big back and hamstrings, and then you're also so it's like you could almost break your set. It's a little tricky because depending on your technique, there's overlap between the two, but you could break your session into like, okay, well, this is squat, bench, deadlift practice, practicing the skill of lifting heavy weights with good form. And then I go do my thing where I just go try to get diesel. I just do a bunch of heavy bodybuilding work, and I try to progress all of these motions that kind of overlap with the musculature used. There's some overlap there because you can use the squat, the bench, and the deadlift also as drivers of hypertrophy through a volume phase. But if you were to break it into like that simple 2-part thing, you could go a long way without really needing to revisit it. It's a little bit more complicated than that, actually, because we can use the bench press to build volume.
Right.
And that's actually what's getting me more jacked and proficient. It's like, sure, that's a good point, but we might not even need to think about that if we're just, I bench like 5 or less reps with really good technique for a reasonable number of sets. And then I just go try to do like heavy, good form bodybuilding training. And I try to progress those.
Yeah.
That'll work for a hot minute.
Yeah. And I really have always liked having like one self-limiting variation that's like a step away from the main lift, but you get more ROM or something. So like, you love dumbbell press and the neutral grip. Shouts out Megalodon bench, got me my first 315.
Hell yeah.
Still basking in it. But I have access to a cambered bar now, and I know you use that too. But yeah, I love that, and it feels a little bit more similar. Because
I love extended ROM pressing in general, right? Like I think, Mike T posted a long time ago, just like, even if it doesn't directly carry over, work on a variation that places emphasis on the bottom ranges of a raw lift is almost never wasted. We don't have that supportive equipment. Mechanically, that's the most difficult position. So it's like, why do we miss high in the deadlift? Because we fudged our positions lower in the deadlift. Why do we miss high in the bench press? A lot of the time because we lost our back tightness to get it moving off the chest, because we didn't have the strength to move it properly off the chest. Same thing with like the squat. Why did we miss really high? Because our back kind of broke down to keep that weight moving a lot of the time, right? So a lot of the time, high misses are caused by weaknesses lower in the range of motion. Not always, but for raw lifting where we don't have all this supportive equipment, it's a good use of time to just blanket use self-limiting variations that emphasize the bottom, not the top half of the lift. And I think that's part of the reason that old conjugate programming maybe didn't scale quite as well raw, is inherently their exercise selection biased towards top range emphasis variations that make the top end harder, because that pairs better with equipped lifting.
Right.
Because the higher you get in the range of motion, the more work you are having to do mechanically. But for raw lifting, you can't go wrong with like a Larson press, a long pause bench, a bench camber bar, a low pin press. For squat, like pause squats, 1 1/2 squats, squat to pins, deadlifts with a pause off the floor, small deficit pulls. Like, I would argue a stiff leg is almost kind of a bottom emphasis lift in some way. And I would say you really, like, maybe you didn't hit the nail on the head and your kind of theory as to what your problems were was wrong. That work wasn't wasted. The muscularity you built and the strength you built, maybe, it won't be displayed until you bring up the actual rate limiter. but it was not bad use of, like, sometimes you'll pick a variation that's like, if it's too zany, it's like, wow, that was not a good use of training time. That work was semi-wasted. Hard work is seldom wasted in general because we did get some physical adaptations for it, but work in the bottom ends of the range of motion is almost never a bad idea. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody's like, oh, I did too much pause squatting. Like, maybe they messed up their motor pattern. It takes a sec to get their rebound back.
Sure.
But they got stronger. It wasn't a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole too far, but I noticed going back to low bar, just because it was more weight than I was used to having on my back high bar, like I was descending so much slower than I needed to. It's like, that was, when I watch it back, it's like, that was a tempo squat, dude, you know? And then
that's
it's like,
that's a one, people make the mistake in both directions. They get scared and they dive bomb it, but it's like, we should probably, again, the feedback is what leads to our best performance. Some people descend faster, some people descend slower. First and foremost, we should imagine what we think is best practice for a heavy weight. And then we should do our warm-ups like that. I think that's a very common mistake, is if you would go slow with a heavy weight and you think that's what's best with a heavy weight, go slow with your 2-plate warm-up to practice actually what it is you're going to be doing. It shouldn't get progressively slower with the weight on the bar. You shouldn't be dive bombing one plate and then by the time it's heavy. If you're someone who dive bombs the heavy one, then yeah, sure, dive bomb your early ones. If you're the kind of person that works very well you're that very athletic, dynamic squatter, then do all of them like that. If you're a slow squatter when it gets heavy, warm up with the slow negative and then a forceful concentric. But also, people have biases where they get they rely on that stretch reflex too fast, or they're too timid with their heavy weights. And I would have a better result if I slowed down, or let's say hypothetically, you would have a better result if you were a little bit more aggressive, if you had a little bit more stretch reflex, because it's like, it's all about, like, a lot of people say you should squat the fastest you can control, right? If you can't control it, you're going to hit that stretch reflex. You're going to be thrown slightly forward or slightly backwards. And then that stretch reflex is doing nothing for you because it's not straight back up. And then you're in a poor position and you miss a weight you otherwise would have had. But if you can control it and that bounce is straight back up, that might be just an extra 5 pounds on the bar. It's a good thing. So it's as fast as you can control. And that is with heavy weights, not as fast as you can control with light weights.
Sure. Yeah. And there is that. I think that one thing I have picked up on with myself is, like, in the early stages of the hypertrophy phase, I'll be controlling my tempo more intentionally. And sometimes when I get to the strength block, navigating that transition, it's like, okay, what is my optimal tempo, to produce maximum
I was
force?
just talking to one of the guys I coach about, man, there's so many things about that transition into a strength phase that's just a little tricky, because it's your first, like, your nervous system's a little detrained. So maybe your first heavy single, it feels concerningly heavy, but it always feels concerningly heavy. And the more times you do it, you're like, yeah, it comes back. But Max and I always joke, like, the first single of strength phase feels like a brick shit house. And it's like 83%. Like, God, that doesn't build confidence. But once you've done it enough times, you're like, next week will feel about the same or slightly better with a bit more weight, and then it'll catch up. We have enough. We've spanned enough singles to retrain this quality in time, and we know that because we've done it over and over and over. But it's always concerning, right? It's like you do some goofy stuff you were doing through the hypertrophy phase to get more reps, and then you try to do that with heavy weight, and it feels like shit. Like, there's always there's some real skills you learn how to make that transition a little bit smoother. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think there's an argument then for keeping a single in, like super sub max, like RPE?
I've got like a couple of guys that do that. I believe it's more mental than physical. Usually the people that benefit from that, it's because they're a head case and they don't maybe handle that reintroductory phase very well. They do just panic. And eventually I would love to build them towards not needing to, because it just takes, it's a little bit of energy taken away from what could have been building more volume through that hypertrophy phase, even if it's negligible amounts of energy. I'm a big believer of, like, if we're doing periodized training, make the goal, and the goal is building volume and hypertrophy. Is it the end of the world? No. Could I like, are there some of them I might never take it out? Yeah. Ideally we build that skill set mentally to understand that we are going to detrain our peak strength through a hypertrophy phase. And that's how training works. And that was something that, like, I remember distinctly kind of figuring that out is, I heard someone say, like, you can't just train heavy all the time. You need to back away, build a base, and then ramp back up to break through that plateau. Okay, cool. Little battering ram analogy. That makes sense. Cool. Boom, pow. I'm on the same page there. And I did it, and it worked. Again, I had to ramp into it because I didn't just build volume and then try a new max, right? Because I realized my max was actually down, but I stuck it out and I ramped back up, and I was able to exceed that wall I just kept hitting up against. right? So I understood, okay, we're going to back away, we're going to build volume, and it's not a problem if our max is down a little bit during that backed away phase, as long as we're still working really hard, right? Sometimes guys back away and then they just use it as an excuse to train like a pussy, and then they do just actually get weaker. And they're like, yeah, I need to stay lifting heavy. Well, you need to stay lifting heavy because that's the only way you can get yourself to lift to a relevant RPE, because you're just racking your shit early. Like you're not actually taking your squat sets to RPE 8. The only way you can do an 8 is to load a weight that a single is an 8. So it's like it's the only way you're getting to relevant intensities, because you don't train very hard. But for the most part, if a guy stays working hard, he builds that base and then he ramps into it in sufficient time, he'll be able to break through that. And I understood that pretty well early. And I think that served me really well, was not being scared of that max being temporarily down. It's supposed to be strong when it's supposed to be strong. And we're supposed to be good at volume when we're supposed to be good at volume. And we're not trying to preserve both at the same time and do some kind of pseudo concurrent, because I didn't find that worked very well for me, is trying to be good at both at the same time. It's the same thing as like the first week of a hypertrophy phase. I'm not in great shape. Compared to the demands of the training I want to do. And that's not necessarily a problem. That's a feature of the block. As long as I've got enough time to build into new all-time volume PRs, cool, that's fine. I'm good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And great argument against DUP. Sometimes I get tempted.
I think that like the DUP can work. I think that you still need to have, and most of the guys that use DUP effectively, there's still a background periodization. I think that like a true concurrent DUP is very like solid for early intermediate, and then you outgrow it and need to move to more periodized training. But if you have a background like, okay, well, I've got my heavier day follows this greater periodization scheme of like, it starts at 5s and tapers to 1s, and then the volume day starts at 10s and tapers to 5s, and you have a more zoomed out periodization. Yeah, a heavy day and a light day can work in a more traditionally periodized scheme easily. That can work great. So I don't think DUP sucks. I think that just like guys who think they reinvented the wheel and they think they're geniuses because they're just going to be good at everything at the same time. It's like, dude, you think I didn't think of that? God damn it. Like, I would love to be in amazing shape and maximally strong and this and that at all times. It's like, yes, I thought of that too.
And shockingly, it's hard to chase, 3 different rabbits at once.
They all kind of get a little stagnant, right? Whereas if we can really lean into one for a while, and then like Chad Wesley Smith talks about phase potentiation, you order them so they lead logically into one another. We can really dedicate our resources into being in really good condition to build that volume. And then we dedicate that to being really good at kind of like 4 to 6 rep PRs and maybe sub max singles. And then we dedicate that to ability PRs above 90% in like the 1 to 3 rep range, right? It's like we can kind of avoid that stagnation that comes with doing a little bit of all 3 all the time by really leaning into one at a time. And then we order them in a way where they flow logically from one to the other so that we have positive training momentum.
That makes a lot of sense.
I would also add to the squat negative thing. The other thing I think a lot of people miss is your descent speed doesn't need to be uniform. A lot of good squatters will use a certain tempo for the first 3/4 of the negative and then slightly speed up at
the Ray Williams, right?
Exactly, right. And like you'll see a lot of like bigger guys will do that, and part of that is at that point, maybe 2/3 of the way down is when they start running into their gut runs into their thighs, so they get a little bit more external stability, so they feel safe. Speeding up a little bit. So it's like you can like use a asynchronous descent speed to try to get best of both worlds. Because again, it's about how fast can you descend with with really good control. The second we lose compromised control, it's a net negative. But a little bit of stretch reflex goes a long way. And so like Max will think about like, okay, 3/4 of the way is this slightly slower cadence, and then I speed up to get a bounce, because I can, it's like a tennis ball, right? If we drop that tennis ball from 4 feet in the air and we have a point we're trying to hit on the floor, it's pretty unreliable. We're like trying to guesstimate where we're over. We're not looking over it perfectly. If we lower that tennis ball to 1 foot off the floor, we can probably hit that penny pretty reliably. So it's like the height from which we're dropping is going to be pretty directly relevant to like our ability to control and be precise with our midfoot pressure. So it's like, if you drop that ball from standing at the top of your squat, there's a good chance you miss, unless you're a very athletic, dynamic squatter, like some guys are. Like back in the day, Shane Heyman, my friend Winston Tom, monster squatter, weighed like 200 pounds, natty, 7-plate squat, just dive bombed. Like came from a weightlifting background, moved to a mid bar, just dunked, right? Amazing. And he's able to be that precise.
Yeah.
Most people are missing that thing on the ground. So it's like, hey, we control it to a little closer, and then when we know we can hit it, then we get a little bounce. Yeah, do you get as much bounce as Winston got? No, but you're gonna hurt yourself if you try to squat like that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I might be shooting myself in the foot. Well, first of all, not practicing low bar in the lead up, but also I do low bar in heels. And I think I sacrifice a little bit of stability for drive out of the bottom with that. And so I may play around with switching back to flats and
Yeah, so my kind of rule of thumb, really, really, really broadly speaking, is if you can hit good positions with or without heels, I would usually favor towards without.
Okay.
Because if you haven't done a ton of lifetime reps in heels, they will throw you forward a little bit.
Yeah.
Someone who's done a weightlifter does every overhead, every deadlift, every squat in them, you intuitively correct for that forward tilt extremely efficiently because everything you do is in those things. They're never going to throw you forward. They're part of your feet at this point, right? But if you're someone like, oh, I deadlift in flats and I bench in flats and over in flats, but so then I put on some heels and then you try to be dynamic at all, a lot of the time it'll throw you forward. So it's like if you can get really nice positions, keep your tightness well, get depth in flats, I usually will favor, like if an athlete's like, I don't have a preference, it feels good both ways, I will favor the flats usually because it's just one less variable, right? It's one less thing that could throw off your stability, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The stair calf raises prior to, squat days has really helped me.
Yeah, that's like there's so much old school stuff like that of like, oh, train calves, like where they weren't powerlifting, they were bodybuilding. But if you loosen up your calves beforehand, you can squat more effectively. That's perfectly applicable to strength athletes. Most of my strongmen have ankles that are made of stone from doing a bunch of yokes. They don't bend anymore. So I'm like, just do some fucking seated calf raises before. Like it's an old bodybuilding thing. And I was like, I forget who it was. Someone said something cool. I was like, I don't like the whole I don't like the whole evidence-based thing. I don't like the whole anti-evidence-based thing. I think it's a dumb circle jerk of like, I don't want to see any value in this discussion at all at this point. It's just like people being like, oh, science is bad. Am I right, boys? Or haha, science is good. Am I right, boys? And it's just like you got your camps. They're like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's really stupid. But I will say someone said that like, I think when it comes to like practically learning strength training programming or programming for bodybuilding, you could probably learn more from studying the history of training than you can from reading literature. There's less science to be learned. There's less physiology to be learned. And I'm not saying there's no value in reading literature, but in terms of practically writing programming, I do kind of tend to agree that if you have a good understanding of what programming and exercise routines and exercise techniques have looked like across history, that might actually be a better base for writing a actionable program than like if you could only do one or the other. I'm probably picking the history emphasis of research than the academic research.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many confounding factors that can't be accounted for in like such a limited sort of setting like that. You're going to study these like intermediate trainees for 6 weeks, and
you read the methods. What is volitional failure? I'll tell you what it is. It's not failure. That's just
right.
That's just when the person chose to end the set. That isn't fit. Like that does not really speak to anything. Right. Or like perceived reps in reserve. We also have evidence to suggest most people don't actually know their reps in reserve. So there's a lot of like there's a bunch of confounding variables. You look at some of the studies and the exercise routines that they're alleging that they're doing don't look actually doable. Like I forget what it was. Lyle McDonald was really hung up on some Brad Schoenfeld study where it was like, allegedly they squatted 3 sets of squats to mechanical failure on like 1.5 minutes rest and then did like 3 sets of leg. It's like no one can fucking do that. Clearly what's being written and what's being done. There's a little disconnect. Are there videos of these sets so I could see what exactly the training that it like? So we're like, in this study, we're looking at the efficacy of a training program. I would like to see a video of that training being done so I better understand what it is we're actually investigating the efficacy of. And there's a big disconnect there a lot of the time in terms of like, we don't actually a lot of the time know exactly, you can have a very thoroughly written methods and there's things that like, I want to see a video and I have a better understanding of like, okay, then I can understand like, okay, this study said that the guys that trained and it looked roughly like this got better results than the guys that trained look like this. I can draw some conclusions from that. Maybe I'm just stupid and I'm illiterate, which is maybe true, But I have a hard time parsing too much that's practically actionable from reading the written descriptions that I'm given.
Yeah.
I don't actually think that's a unique problem to me. I think that's a major flaw with kind of making our training decisions based on this. So I'll end it there. I don't like this whole. I think it's just stupid. We should be looking at both. We should take them both for what they are, which is both helpful resources with their own limitations. And the discussion kind of stops there. As much as putting in the title science-based gets you views.
Right.
It's more just being fueled by the fact that it's like a pseudo controversy than it's actually a good discussion,
Yeah, totally. So as far as your trajectory, you're planning on competing as a 120 in strongman.
That's kind of emerging as a class. Talking to my friend Lucas, who knows more about this than I do, he's saying he believes it'll be about 2 years before 120 kg is a class at like OSG.
Okay.
OSG is the world championship for everything except the big guys. So there will be like a competitive, legitimate world championship for 120 in about 2 years, which is perfect because I think I got about 2 years of work before I am a complete strongman athlete. I've got some things I'm already like, I think I could go pretty toe to toe with most guys my size. And then I've got some things that I cannot, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, it's not about getting, I don't have to get too much better at my strengths, just a little bit better at my strengths. It's about filling in those weaknesses. Like I've never trained somewhere that had Atlas stones. So that's a bit of a, like, I'm not actually terrible at it. The 2 shows I've done, I won the stone event, but that's at a local level. I loaded like a 340 stone for like 5 reps. So it's not bad, but if we're talking like world championship guys that are cutting from like 275, I'm getting torched. So it's like, I need to sort that out. My moving events need to be a bit better, right? Again, I talked to my friend Lucas, which was very helpful because he gave me some like time parameters for like yoke runs. He's like, if you're in this ballpark with like an 800 and a 900, you won't be bad. You won't be losing points. And it's like, I'm below those. The numbers he gave me, I'm like, I can't do that. So I'm like, okay, cool. I've got 2 years. I've never been, obviously I've got good genetics. I'm not dumb, right? But the way those have manifested is not the same as like some other people where it's like they'll get lackadaisical through the off season and then they'll dedicate themselves to like a 12-week prep where they push crazy hard. And that 12 weeks is enough to go from undertrained to all-time new peak. That doesn't work for me. I need to keep my foot on the gas all year and just see like more traditional, right? Maybe it's the same rate of progression. So maybe in that way, like I have the same level of genetics, it just manifests differently. Who's to say? I don't know, right? But it's like me and this other guy both are going to add 25 to our lift this year. He has like an off season and then a really hard prep, and then he gets a 20-pound PR. Mine, to get stronger, has always been 5 blocks with 5-pound PRs and a more constant pressure. And that's how I've gotten stronger. That's how Max has gotten stronger. We kind of dabbled in doing it the other way and it did not work very well for us. So it's clear that the potential is there. I'm getting stronger still. I'm young, I'm not that heavy, and I'm still getting stronger at a good rate, pretty resilient to injury. So it's like the propensity is there. It just needs to be done a little differently. So it's like, okay, 2 years, it's quite a few training cycles to just don't take, like, I'll take down weeks if my joints need it. So I'm not gonna be an idiot and work myself to being injured, but keep my foot on the gas on the moving events. Keep my foot on get some fucking Atlas stones first and foremost. I'm buying some sandbags, which doesn't carry over directly, but at least it builds the musculature associated with loading. Because there's a guy, Zach McCarley, who's a former 105 kilo world's strongest man. He's got a video series called Strongman Theory, where he breaks down his way of like kind of dissecting the sport. And it's like overhead lifting, static strength, dynamic, which is moving events, loading, grip, miscellaneous, and conditioning. I think that's the 7 categories or whatever it is, right? So it's like, okay, cool. My conditioning is good. My overhead is good, but getting better. My static is pretty good for my size. So I've got like, and my grip is okay. It's not bad. And that leaves, okay, well, there's miscellaneous, which is just I kind of leave that alone. And then you've got the loading and you've got the dynamic. And that's the 2 of those 7 categories that I probably rank the lowest in. So I can't afford to just be like, oh, well, in the off season, I just work on my static lifts. Well, then they're going to continue to stay that way. In the off season, you can't exclude something that's in your bottom of those categories. Maybe if I was like a elite static guy, right? I could really back off the static, train
Yeah.
squats and deadlifts pretty easy once a week, and then just ramp like to give me more training economy in the off season to be more athletic. And then I could ramp those up in a preparation for a contest, or the reverse. If I'm very good at moving events, I'm good at these odd objects and the stone loads. I could back off of those and do them like pretty low frequency to the off season. Really just focus on my barbells. I, based on my training history, I got decent barbell strength for my size. I feel like I'll be all right.
Yeah.
But I do not have the odd object strength, which is weird because it's like I should be a little bit better at the dynamic, because usually if a guy is like reasonably statically strong and has preserved his athleticism, there's a bit of a takeoff there that works pretty good. I'll find me 260-pound guys. I can jump pretty high. I can run pretty fast.
Yeah.
But it has not translated to my yoke quite yet. So off season, lots of yoke in my driveway is in my future. And then
Nice.
lots of picking up sandbags and putting them over the yoke. And then hopefully we'll get some stones.
Are you getting like those rogue sandbags that are sort of like pseudo Husafel shaped?
So I'm getting the Cerberus ones, because those are kind of used. They're pretty widely used, like OSG. If they ever get my weight class, they usually use Cerberus bags. They're pretty, they never break, which is nice. Like they're dual ply thickness, so you don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about my home gym getting filled with sand one of these days.
Right.
So I'm getting a little collection of those bad boys. I've got a 308-pound one right now, and I just ordered a 265-pound one.
Okay.
And then next I'll either buy like the 350, or I will buy the 220 as like a warm-up bag.
Cool. Yeah.
Not having a warm-up bag has been killing me.
Really? You're just jumping straight to
having go straight to the 308 feels dangerous.
Man.
It feels like shit. I can't get my technique locked in beforehand. I just have to figure out the technique. Like I'll do a general warm-up, obviously. Like you use a band, you warm up your biceps to reduce that risk of that popping. Maybe you do some RDLs and some squats to get your lower, like kind of hip hinge moving, maybe some jumps to move explosively, and then you go pick it up. Goddamn, maybe it's just my barbell bias. I like being able to do a specific warm-up, but that shows all the time. They're just like, oh yeah, we don't have another yoke. Just kind of
man.
We'll like do some walking lunges in the parking lot and then just get under an 800 yoke. And it's like, you gotta be able to do that. Like, it's not negotiable. It happens. And so it's like, I've gotten over that hurdle, but in training, when I can, I like to have lighter and lighter versions of each thing. Because, my understanding of strength training is that it's a very repetitive task, and being able to do repetitions of a weight, being able to do repetitions of an exercise, being able to repeat the same kind of sessions with slight advancements from week to week is how you get better. It's the same reason I could never do conjugate training. The way I understand this to work is inherently monotonous and repetitive, and I like it.
Right.
And so I don't feel prepared. Like if you said, Sam, we're going for the 350 bag, I wouldn't feel prepared for that if last week we did Atlas stones. I need that repetition is how I prepare for things. I think it keeps me safe. So maybe
totally,
you could say that's a mental weakness of mine, and that like, oh, that's not the spirit of strongman. I say, sure, fair, but it keeps me safe that I like to prepare specifically.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how mentally strong you are if you've torn both your biceps.
It's hard to pick things up after that.
Right. So I guess you're going to prioritize like maximal touches in the events, like the loading stuff over the next couple of years.
I'm going to use I'll be trying to use like something like light sandbag loading for more of a conditioning protocol as warm up for like some of my deadlift days. Like you can build in pseudo higher frequencies to events by using them as conditioning or by using them as a warm up for other days. So it's like you can build in a little bit of moving practice. If I use like, instead of farmers, I'm doing suitcase carries as my warm up for my overhead day. It's just a way you can build those into your routine that I plan on taking advantage of. And then we'll see. I've been advised by people smarter than me that trying to push for high frequencies of heavy on some of these events is a fool's errand, and that I'll hurt myself. Bromley told me that. Lucas told me that. Like a bunch of guys who are better than me told me that. So I'm like, all right, I'll take that on the chin, but I do like higher frequency training models for myself. Obviously, for some of my athletes, that's a no-go, especially my bigger guys. They're like, even guys my size, now we're leaning away from higher frequency training models, but it seems to be what I learn. I only learn motor patterns if I do something often. Like doing something once a week, I just don't get any better at it. I need to do it often. And thankfully, I've got the physiology to get away with doing it often. So I'll do maybe I'll only do one heavy yoke, and I'll do light yoke for speed as a warm up for my lower day. That way I can touch it twice a week, because I only get better at things when I touch them a little bit more often. I know that, so I'm building that into my off season.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So 2 years, we're gonna see you maybe ascend the podium at the OSG 120s.
That would be wonderful.
Are there any goals that you're comfortable sharing, but that are like bucket list for you?
See, that's the funny thing is I've never really liked long-term goals because they're just kind of made up. It's like I don't really
Sure.
have, even now, I don't have a big enough base of evidence
Yeah.
to give you, because I would have told you a while ago, like, is 600 even realistic? I don't know. I've done it and I'm 25. I've got time to spare. So
Yeah.
clearly it was. But at one point that would have sounded dumb.
Yeah.
So you don't want to undershoot, you don't want to overshoot. I don't know. It doesn't give me extra motivation to say something that far away because it's not based in reality. It's just based on what sounds nice.
Yeah.
And if it's not based in reality,
That's
I can't
true.
really draw legitimate motivation from it. So it's like, would I like to deadlift 1,000 pounds? Fuck yes.
Sure,
That
yeah.
sounds so cool. I'll gimmick it, dude. I won't wear a deadlift suit, but I'll wear my figure
Sure.
eights, deadlift bar, fucking bendy bar, pound
Yeah.
plate. I'll do but if
Yeah.
I pulled 1,000 pounds conventional in training, that sounds so sick. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Do I think I could? Yeah, sure. Why not? Right. Like I think my trajectory so far would say no. Right. Like, oh man, you're 11, 12 years into like very serious training. Yeah, I'm still 25. Yeah, I got room to grow, but like you're only at 835, dude.
Yeah.
Each 5 pounds gets harder. And I'm
Yeah.
very painfully aware of that. But yeah,
Yeah.
why not? Why not 1,000, right?
Yeah.
I'd like to put 500 over my head, right?
Oh my God. That's Andrew Richards' strength.
Yeah, right. I'll use my legs though.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like I know, like I don't really know. I've never like I've always been more of like a short-term goals guy. Like I like to be obsessive about my 5 pound PR for this block and how amped I am for that, and what do I need to do to get ready? What do I need to do to get ready? You know, like maybe the 600 was like more of the 600 and the 880 goals, or a little bit. Even those are like a little zoomed out. Like if it was up to me, 880 sounds better for a title. But I would like to be focused on like an 855 deadlift because that is 9 plates. And it's like that sounds like, okay, I know more about what that will take. I know more about the timeline for that. I think I'm getting a little closer to it. Not to show my hand, but I'm getting a little closer. I'm pretty strong right now. So it's like I would know more about that, and I would drive more motivation from that. So it's like I don't know. I really don't know. Like I've never understood it. I'm going to do my best, and where I land, I land. I'm focused on doing like one day at a time. I never understood those zoomed out ones because usually it seems like people are almost just like patting themselves on the ass for something they haven't done by saying like a crazy goal. You don't get credit for saying it. You know what I mean? Like
Totally.
If I had $1 for every time someone sent me their like training questionnaire for like coaching and they're like, I'm going to be the world's strongest man. You don't get credit for that. And then they suck. They're usually terrible clients because they actually didn't understand what that entails. So I don't want to be that guy and be like, oh, I'm going to do 1,000 pound deadlift. And they're like, I don't know. I don't know what that entails. And I look like a big old dummy when I don't do it. So like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the 600 is a weird one for me because it's like at one point I was like, one day I might bench 405. And then I bench 405. You know, I got closer. I was like, I can do that. And by the time I was like, I could do that, I was like, oh, cool. Well, that means if I can do that, I can do more.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember I benched 400. I was like, man, it's a big ask, but I think one day I could do 500. And I did 500. Yeah. And then I was like, when I benched 500, 600 didn't even cross my mind because I knew how much more work it was to get from 455 from 405. That was way more work.
Sure.
And then 500 from 450 was more work. And I like pushing my food harder, training harder, getting heavier, you know? And so it's like, I wasn't so foolish to be like, oh, well, 600 is what's next, I guess. I was like, no, 515 is what's next. You know, 505 is what's next. You know what I mean? So, I try to treat things and kind of see where I pan out. Like sometimes I think it's fun to like think like, oh, maybe my trajectory is good because I think I've got a bad habit of maybe underestimating myself because I compare myself to that gigantor in the room over there.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I don't know. I think I do need to view myself as slightly more capable than I do. It's a bad habit of mine, but I also don't necessarily be like, oh, well, I'm going to do a 700 bench. I don't know. I'm not even training the bench right now. Why would I say that? Right.
Yeah.
Like I'll give her hell and see where it lands.
You know, that's very wise. What is more predictable is what's at the end of this training cycle. And to fixate on that 5 or 10 pound PR, it's like that requires you to align everything in the next 12 weeks to get there.
If you're advanced, you know what that takes.
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know what 1,000 will take. I'm gonna try.
Yeah.
But I have no idea what that'll take. I just don't have any data about what the 900s are like, you know?
Yeah.
Not even in the high 8s yet. You know, all of this
Right.
shit is like even saying 880, you know what I mean? Like we'll see, like I guess I've come to the conclusion I'm slightly stronger than I think I am, because it's like I'll see people deadlift 80. I'm like, man, I'm not like that guy. I think I'm gonna do it. I see people go 60. I'm not like that guy. Clearly, I must be kind of like that guy.
Basically, what I'm hearing from this is when I did bench 315 at the end of the Megalodon pressing program again after 11 years of training, I shouldn't have immediately shouted 405 next, motherfuckers.
Yes, yeah, well, that's the reason I don't, like you said, very wise. It's like, because I've done that. I've been like, oh, that was so easy. What's next, right?
Yeah,
another 100 pounds, and it's like, we've all shot called something and then had it shoved in our face that we're an idiot, and that's way harder. Like we all have a good patch of really rapid linear progression, and then we extrapolate it linearly. Like, if I just keep going next year, I'll be at this. And it's like, it never keeps going, right? Like that was an insanely good patch of linear progression that was usually preceded by a patch where you were doing a lot of work and it wasn't paying off. So you're building potential, and then you expressed it all at once. Just extrapolating that extra fast progression because you were expressing something you had failed to express prior. It's not how it worked. You didn't build genuinely that much strength. You built maybe 10 pounds, and then the other 15 came from potential that you had failed to express from prior training. So extrapolating that out of like, if I just add 20 pounds every training cycle, I will fucking whoop Julius Maddox's ass, dude. Like,
right.
We all can play that game, and we all have played that game and look back like, I should have said that. Like, I can look back and I think I've got some old Instagram guys who are like, 405 next any day now.
Classic.
Like, that took you a couple years, buddy.
Like, yeah.
So it's like, like I've definitely learned that lesson of just, and it doesn't mean anything. It's just like, because the more you know, the more you don't know, right? And it's like,
totally.
I don't know what the fuck 1,000 feels like. I don't know what the training will need to look like. I don't need to know what I need to hit on my rows, what kind of numbers I need to hit on my hamstring curls, the quality of my preparation, the volume. I don't know. And so it's like, I don't know how someone could derive, like, it's just delusional young man. Wouldn't it be cool? And that's their motivation to go train. Whereas like the 5 to 10 pound PR, I know roughly what that needs to do. And it's like adding that amount of weight is a sizable task. So it's like, I got some work to do. Get to fucking work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how will you know whenever you are kind of fulfilled in your strongman pursuit and it's time to get back to combat sports?
Probably some number of repeated injuries when trying to push, combined with difficulty returning my health markers to an off-season baseline. Just like trying to be like objective with it. It's like, if I push, I get hurt. It happens to anybody. I push, I get hurt again. Okay, it'll probably enter my head of like, okay, that's usually how it goes, is older guys who are very advanced strength athletes, they don't lose the ability to get stronger. They just get hurt easier, so they can't actually make it to the contest. But doing those things they've learned over the last 20 years, it still works. It's just that they can't do it without getting hurt anymore. It's like, you look at like Big Laws's career. That was like how it went, right? It's like, he never had like a prep where he's just like, I'm just not getting stronger. That wasn't how it went. It would be something would go pop. So it's like, I think third injury in a row, I'll try to learn my lessons from the first two and make adjustments to make sure I'm not like getting a false positive. Like, if I'm just making a mistake, that would kill me to think that like, I called it after the second injury, but it wasn't age. It was, I could have done something better and avoided it. Right. Third mistake, I learned from I learned from the first two. I still hurt myself. Okay. That way, like, we're talking major injuries. We're talking probably surgery. That'll be kind of sign. Or if like my off-season blood work is just not getting better, I'll probably be forced to downsize. I don't know what my peak career weight will be. I would guess like 300.
Okay.
That's
So you would,
that's very bad.
That's at 5'10", right? And that's a significant cut, which, I mean, taxes, your system as well, right? The cut
if I go to 300, I will be competing in the open.
Okay. So you're not going to cut 40 pounds or whatever.
No,
makes sense.
No. I'm pretty anti-weight cut. As long as I'm competing at 264, I probably wouldn't want to get much above 270. I think that there is a competitive advantage. Like, yes, there's a competitive advantage to be gained by weight cutting and being basically bigger than the class actually allows. Huge advantage. There's a reason everybody does it. And in powerlifting, you can't really get around that. You could be so good, you don't do it, but you could have been even better. Yuri Belkin used to no cut. For the most part, there's a reason people do it. Strongman being a little bit more endurance centric, being a little bit more physically rigorous on the day. Water cuts drastically affect your endurance.
Sure.
So it's the same thing with like fighting, right? Being bigger is a huge advantage, but it does hurt your gas tank for everybody to varying degrees. So there is a competitive advantage that you could choose to gain by walking around and doing a minimal cut where you're smaller than the other guy, but you're guaranteed to have better cardio, right? There's a couple guys in like the UFC and boxing that have been notorious for doing this and having that competitive advantage. I think to some degree that same thing extrapolates to strongman. Is like, yeah, you're bigger and you might be lifting more than me on event 1, but let's check in on event 4 and 5. You know, if you're really gassed out because you're in a bad way from that big weight cut, and I'm feeling pretty good because I didn't cut, and this is just like a hard events day for me. I'm pretty used to doing this in training. I might be able to pick up some points that I lost early. I just don't like the idea of weight cutting, so I'm selling myself on this narrative that I will also have an advantage by being the anti-weight cut guy. We'll see. If I'm just getting my ass whooped, I'll get bigger and I'll weight cut. You know, I don't like losing. But yeah, I think like, you know, I am not too fat at 260.
You're not fat. You got some dysmorphia going on.
But I could be like a lean 265, you know, and like that's probably big enough to lift some pretty big weight. You know, that's big, quite a bit bigger than I am. The difference between like a slightly chunky 260 and like a leaner 265 is pretty substantial. You know what I mean? So it's like I've got room to grow within this class for quite a while before I would need to like actually be looking at weight cutting. And then I would love to try my hand at open because it's cool. No one cares about, oh, you're the strongest small guy. I'll be the strongest guy. Like, you know, if I like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is speaking of arrogance and not knowing anything, right? If I hypothetically could be the 9th strongest man in the world, period, that might mean more to me than being the number 1 at 120 kilos. I don't know.
Makes a lot of sense.
I might say that, but winning is cooler than 9th. So
sure.
I might change. That opinion is subject to change if I'm ever in the position where these things are possible.
Well, you know, here's what you do.
It's easy to say that when I'm not winning anything, right?
Right. Well, you take out the 120s, you know, in 2 years or 4 years, and then you have the title, and then you move up. You let yourself.
Yeah, when you get you do get invites if you are like a lower weight class champion moving up, because sometimes it's like a big clusterfuck in America because we don't have nice qualifying systems like the British guys do to get into some of these big shows. So it's like it's a good way to kind of get yourself that invite is if you are a previous world champion in a lighter weight class. That's kind of a novelty invite that they're willing to make. So that is viable. You know what I mean? Whereas like if you're just a really solid American super heavyweight, good luck. There's a lot of you, you know, he's like, you know, Lucas Hatton, the guy I know from Washington, who got 3rd place at the Arnold UK, you know, he only lost to Mitch Hooper and Halfthor.
Yeah. The world's strongest McDonald's manager, right?
Yeah, exactly. It took him forever. He was at that level. And like the guys who know have known Lucas Hatton was like bound to be a good performance when he finally got an invite. People who are in the know about the American scene. There's a couple of guys in that category with Lucas who are already ready to show up and like bust the door down of international shows. They're just not getting the invite. And everybody in the comments like, where'd this guy come from? It's like, you just don't follow. He's been around. He just hasn't been getting, there's more guys like him. You know what I mean? I would argue Lucas might be one of the, like maybe the best of them, but there's more guys like him. The same thing happened with Matt Ragg making the finals at Worlds, and then he beat Mitch Hooper at like a Giants live show. Everybody who knows has known Matt Ragg is a killer. The guy is a fucking monstrosity of a human, and everybody's known about him, and he's already been this strong for a while. It just, he wasn't given his opportunity yet, right? So it's like getting the opportunities in the sport is tricky if you don't have a huge social media following. So, you know, that'd be this is way down the line. I need to win something meaningful first, but that is a good novelty route to getting those invites, getting your name out there, and then you can start getting those re-invites if fans like you.
Yeah. Well, hey, when you do, I think you're going to have a huge fan following behind you already. You're going to be a fan favorite. Well, your base is so loyal.
We got to be objective here. I appreciate your positivity. Do you know how many videos I have posted?
No.
Try to guess.
Is it over 100?
Yes.
Okay. Is it over 130?
Yes.
200?
Yes. More.
300?
More.
500?
More.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Okay, how many? Just give it to me.
750. I believe I'm at 750 YouTube videos.
Wow.
And they're not like short. I don't think there's any shorts in there.
Wow.
I think I
Man,
posted 300 videos before my first 100 subscribers. So
that's crazy.
we're not catching on like wildfire over here.
Yeah. Well,
I've got my loyal core audience,
oh,
but I have fought tooth and nail
yeah.
to get to that loyal core audience. Do you know Paris, Bald
Of
Omni Man?
course,
Yeah,
classic. Yeah.
I'm friends with Paris. Paris started YouTube like 3 years after I did. I have,
Oh,
I think, 5 times as many videos as Paris. It's like once he passed that 1,000 mark, it just spiraled into his
yeah.
like 30K. Apparently I'm not marketable.
It's shocking to me how well, as someone who's much more interested in the strength side, general YouTube is so much more interested in the bodybuilding
Yeah, but Bromley's doing
aesthetics,
great.
right? That's very true. Yeah.
But his videos are very high production value,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yeah.
like that's part of it, right? Bromley is
Bromley,
also a guy who grinded it out. Bromley's a lot of videos.
totally working at the macaroni grill, 1 bedroom apartment, until he,
Yeah, Bromley's been on
yeah.
that grind.
Yeah, yeah. Future podcast guest, tentative confirmation from him. So calling him, putting him on the spot here, though he won't see this, I'm sure. But
No, Bromley's
yeah,
a cool guy. Every interactions I've had with him has been great, right? Like, they always say like, oh, the whole heroes thing, right? Like usually they're gonna be a dickhead. Knock on wood, so far, everybody I've interacted with has been pretty cool,
Yeah.
right? Like I know Paris,
Mhm.
Alpha Destiny was
Yeah.
super cool. Bromley was super cool. Like so far, not too bad. I've had much worse experience with like athletes than YouTube folks. Maybe that's
Yeah.
also because the only people that are willing to interview my small channel have an ass are nice guys. And then the people that are dickheads have no interest in having me on. Maybe there's like a selection bias going on there.
Yeah.
I've got my theories about some guys maybe I wouldn't like.
Okay.
Not that I'm not
Yeah.
gonna say any, right? But
Sure.
I've got
Sure.
my theories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Bromley's interview with you is how I found your channel initially.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
definitely helped with the because I was like not stuck, but like I was like pretty slow progression, about 2K.
Mhm.
All the way through like 500 videos.
Yeah.
And I would say like those interviews I did maybe 1 or 2 with Bromley and then 1 with Alex Leonidas. Those definitely are the only reason I'm at 7K now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, you deserve to be so much bigger, and it continually shocks me
I don't
that you
think so.
haven't
I think
caught
it's the
on.
low production value.
Well,
You
you
know what I
got
mean?
this
Like,
webcam now. You're looking crisp.
you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. The beard's on point. The eyebrows are on point. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I definitely, it's like when people think that because they're strong, they're entitled to have a big audience.
Mhm.
And it's like, this isn't a strength contest. We're making educational / entertaining content.
Yeah.
If you do a bad job at that, of course, like people are like, I'm not a social media guy. Yeah, clearly, right? That's fine. Like you can't then be salty. You're not getting big
Right.
returns from the low effort you put into yes, you put effort into lifting, but this is not lifting. This isn't the gym. This is social media. If you put high effort like Bromley does
Yeah.
into like hiring an editor, it's like I would have a larger channel if I put that much effort into actually making quality, entertaining content. I just am a jackass and somehow think I'm above that. So I'm like, I'll just record me saying something.
Well, I think what you are is an athlete, and your day is structured around your training, and so this is something that's fun for you and potentially a secondary income stream, but I think that you have your focus where it needs to be for you.
Yeah,
right
well, the
now.
tricky part, right, is trying to navigate. Like, it seems like I can't really parse how much of the channel should be a coaching perspective versus an athlete's perspective. It seems like the coaching perspective stuff gets more views, which is interesting, right? Because I always thought, I'm like, oh, what sets me apart from the people that like regularly post here on YouTube? I'm stronger. You know what I mean? Like, I am.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, that's the thing that like is a little bit different, right? Because it seems like most of the people that are stronger than me aren't running their YouTubes themselves. And I think
that's
that comes
very
across.
true. Yeah.
It comes across that they've hired like someone else to do it. It's not as intimate, right?
Yeah.
So it's like of people who like really are running their YouTube themselves, one of the stronger ones to my knowledge. And I always thought that was like, oh, that's what makes my channel unique. That's what will make it grow eventually. Doesn't seem to matter very much, right? And it seems like here's how I organize my bench assistance work stuff. That's the most viewed video I've made in the last 2 months, right?
Yeah.
I posted some pretty heavy deadlifts.
Yeah.
I've posted like podcasts. I posted this other stuff, right? And it's like none of those are doing like bad, but that's the most viewed thing I've done. And every time I do bother to get out the whiteboard and put something together like that, it does pretty good. So I'm like, fuck, I guess People don't want to see my lifts. They want to see education. That's terrible.
It's so memey, but the whiteboard is just a YouTube aesthetic, you know.
True.
Yeah, Brendan Teets does it, and Bromley obviously is the classic
Well,
whiteboard
the
guy.
more I've realized, the more I realize it's more necessary than I thought because I'm a
Yeah.
very auditory learner. I always have been. So I
Mhm.
never understood why people needed these dumb whiteboards. Just like tell me
Yeah.
what I should do.
Yeah.
And like the fact that like some people are such profoundly visual learners and like just the audio would do nothing for them and they could never learn anything from listening to a podcast. Like they would have to really focus hard and write it down and then look at it. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, not everybody is like me. Not everybody just needs the audio because I was always wondering like why the fuck does it do so much better with the whiteboard? It does. It does so much better with the whiteboard. It's because probably a third of people need that for it to be useful. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like of course,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's like the same thing as like if I was smarter, I would get B-roll footage and I would also include like footage of myself doing lifts. And
Yeah.
again, that's why I can't be sour grapes that I don't have more following or whatever the fuck for how many videos I've made because I don't put in the effort. Like it's like the same thing. It's like, oh, I don't bench very much. And it's like, you don't do your assistance work. You don't eat protein. Shut the fuck up. Like, I don't feel bad for you. You're not, like, you only get to complain if you're doing all of the work. And if you're doing all the work, I still don't want to hear you complain.
Sure.
At
Yeah.
least you have
Yeah.
a legitimate complaint. You know, like
Yeah.
that's annoying. You are doing, hypothetically, if you're doing everything I am and your bench is stuck at 185, I do feel that's sad. I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
Right. That sucks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing any, like some the guys that complain about, they're like, yeah, no, terrible genetics. It's like you're not doing any of the work, brother.
Right.
It's the same thing. I'm that guy. I'm like, I don't have any following. I'm not fucking
Sure.
B-roll. I just bought a camera. I was making them on like a fucking GoPro forever. And prior to that, it was my busted ass phone. So it's like, I don't get to complain about this. Of course I don't. And like, every time I talk to Bromley, you can tell he thinks the same thing of like,
Yeah.
you're a dumbass, dude. Why don't you just make the videos better? Like you could say the same things. The information quality could say the same. Why don't you just actually bother to make them good? I'm like, no. For some reason, I'm like hung up on. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Great analogy too. What you should do is wear the GoPro, get the lifter's view footage while you're deadlifting.
Oh.
So it's just floor, whatever you're
Yeah.
cueing, right? And
Floor here.
yeah, right. I'd like to see
stuff.
that. Yeah. Well, hey, everybody who listens to this is going to know who you are, but would you mind plugging your channel and just if you're taking clients where they can find you?
Yeah, so my channel is Shethar Training on YouTube. My Instagram is at Shethar, Shethar. My brother's Instagram is at _1_rep_max. Very long. He should change that. My email is shethartraining@gmail.com. I'm currently not taking any clients, but if you wanted to reach me for whatever reason, that is where I can be reached. I also have a Patreon. That is linked in the descriptions of my videos where I try to get back to everyone that has like specific questions about their training. What should I do? There's a bench program on there if you have any interest in that. Maybe eventually I'll get around to putting some other programs on there, but for the most part, the service on there is just guaranteed replies. I try to 24, 48 hour. If anybody has specific questions about their own training, figure 5 a month sounds pretty reasonable to me.
Perfect. Well, I thank you for being so generous with your time, man.
Of course, man.
Yeah, I've really appreciated this. And
I'm taking the Stan Efferding method. I think Stan has a don't decline podcast invites no matter what policy. Because
wow.
I see in my suggested like Stan Efferding will do like a 50 view interview on like a podcast that's got like 10 subscribers. I think he has like a universal always say yes policy.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm being interested. Maybe we should try and have him on our podcast.
Oh, totally. That would be great. First celebrity guest.
We'll try to stop him from doing his usual like pre-cut thing and ask him like bullshit questions.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. Who would win in a fight?
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I'm so grateful you came on, man. It was great talking to you and putting a fit. I mean, like, in person, because I feel like I have this parasocial relationship with you where I've known you through YouTube and I feel like I know you because of the large lads, but it was really great speaking with you.
Well, yeah, nice to meet you, man.